This is the fifth of 5 videos covering material in the 2020 Conference Agenda Report, or CAR for short. This video covers the 11 regional motions. These videos only cover the main points of the CAR. We encourage all members to read the CAR itself. Please visit www.na.org/conference for the complete 2020 CAR, the other videos, and other conference material. In the 2018 Conference Agenda Report, we categorized the regional motions by topic and provided information and links to resources to introduce those topics. That seemed to help members as they workshop the motions, so we are taking the same approach in this CAR. There are 11 regional motions in this Conference Agenda Report. 25 motions were submitted by the August 1st deadline. 12 of those were withdrawn, and 2 did not make the August 30th deadline to be in final CAR-ready form despite an extension of more than a week. What does CAR-ready mean? After a conference participant submits a draft motion for the CAR, the board gets in touch with the participant to help them through the process of getting the motion in final form for the CAR and to let them know if another participant has submitted a similar motion. Some makers withdraw their motions because, after discussing the issue with the board, a resolution was reached. For instance, one motion addressed spelling errors in a translated text, and another asked for revisions to a service pamphlet to update the content. These sorts of issues can be resolved without using a motion. World Services can correct errors in translated texts, and service pamphlets can be updated as needed. Such pieces are posted for a 90-day review so that conference participants can see the proposed changes and give input before the revision is finalized. We have included these proposed ideas about revising the service pamphlets in the current CAR survey that begins on page 24. Project plans. Most of the regional motions in this CAR call for a project plan of some kind for consideration at WSC 2022. The challenge is that motions to create project plans are considered independently of each other and outside of the full range of work for the cycle. Currently, we have 2 independent streams that lead to project creation: the NAS strategic plan and regional motions. We have to figure out how to unify these streams of ideas and consider all of the potential work together so we can make responsible and realistic decisions. Strategic planning. We are trying to create a more collaborative approach to NAS strategic planning so that we can look at all of the potential work side by side. But until we get to that point, conference participants may feel like they have no other mechanisms to introduce their ideas before the WSC. We understand that, and we hope that some of the changes we're making this cycle will help in the future. Because we have projects suggested by regional and zonal motions, as well as projects springing from the NAS strategic plan, there may be more projects presented at WSC 2022 than we can accomplish in a timely manner. We used to draft more project plans than we knew we could work on in a given cycle, but more recently, we have tried to limit the number of projects proposed to reflect what we believe we can accomplish in the cycle. However, there are potentially 8 project plans in the motions that follow, and the NAS strategic planning process and environmental scan will lead to other projects we see as critical in upcoming cycles. For the 2020 to 2022 cycle, we are planning for only 1 in-person work group because of financial considerations. We have been doing more with less by utilizing virtual work groups and web meetings, but we are still limited in the number of projects we can coordinate in a given cycle. If the conference approves more project plans than we have the ability to complete, we will ask for their help in prioritizing them. Working together. As mentioned previously, we are making efforts to create a more inclusive and collaborative planning process. In addition to involving conference participants early in the strategic planning process, we will use the CAR survey to look at all of the ideas for IPs and smaller service pieces next to each other. Fellowship responses to the survey will help conference participants make decisions about how to prioritize the work. Also, for the first time, conference participants will begin laying the groundwork together for the 2022 to 2024 NAS Strategic Plan at the World Service Conference. Our goal is to continue evolving the planning process to create a strategic plan that is collaborative and that allows everyone's ideas to be heard, a process that allows us to make decisions together as a conference about the priorities for the cycle ahead. There are two motions regarding project plans for book-length recovery literature, motions 6 and 7, both about step working guides. There are a couple of sections of this CAR that may be helpful when considering these motions. The essay on strategic planning on page 6 of this conference agenda report explains how project plans are created through our strategic planning process and our efforts to make this process more collaborative and inclusive. The survey in this CAR on page 24 includes a number of ideas for recovery literature for members to prioritize. The CAR survey seems to be the best mechanism to guide the WSC prioritization of projects because the survey includes all of the ideas for recovery literature and service tools that have been offered by conference participants. We are supportive of whatever the fellowship chooses as a priority. Motion 6 reads, to direct the World Board to create a project plan for WSC 2022 to create a new step working guide for members who have worked through the previous one and would like to evolve in their recovery. Intent to develop new literature for members to continue their recovery process by working the 12 steps in order to grow and pass it on to others. Maker, Norway region. Rationale by region. The fellowship is 60 years old. Old-timers and others who have been through the steps many times may want a fresh look at the steps since working the steps is an ongoing process regardless of clean time. It is important that members are inspired to keep on passing a message of recovery for the addicts following in their steps. It is a fact that many members with long clean time leave our fellowship. A new step guide may inspire old-timers to stay in the fellowship. This is a 12-step program, and we should keep our focus on how we can best continue facilitating the growth and involvement of our fellowship, and the literature is a very good way to do this. World Board response. We are in favor of work that supports the growth of the fellowship and in a member's personal recovery. Our program is about the 12 steps, and material that encourages members to work the steps cannot be a bad thing. The challenge is that this is not the only book-length piece about working the steps in this conference agenda report. And as we mentioned in the introduction to the regional motions, one of the drawbacks to creating project plans through regional motions is that the ideas in the motions are considered independently of each other. For an explanation of our approach to prioritization, please see our remarks in the survey introduction on page 24 and the introduction to the book-length recovery literature motions on page 38. The second motion regarding recovery literature is motion 7, which reads, to direct the World Board to develop a project plan for consideration at WSC 2022 to create a booklet of step study questions with the parameter that each question is derived from one sentence in the basic text chapter, how it works. Intent to create a fellowship-approved, inexpensive, NA-step study questions booklet that relates directly back to the basic text. Maker, Bahasan region. Rationale by region. The need is for elemental, non-personal, NA-step study materials that can be read one-on-one in NA group meetings, in institutions, and in behind-the-walls correspondence. When the answers to study questions are the sentences in NA literature, then issues of personality, ego, politics, religion, and other affiliations are removed. The answer is always the original line in the basic text from which the question was created. With a booklet of basic text step study questions and the introductory guide, it is possible to teach and/or study the NA program for about $3. We believe we are identifying a need not generally understood in the first world English-speaking part of our fellowship. Instead of asking for donations, we are requesting your support for the tools we need to succeed. The result of this motion would be a stapled booklet about the size of the group booklet. The NA Introductory Guide, combined with basic text step study questions, is an inexpensive way to bring the NA program into both the incarceration and addiction rehabilitation environments. A first time through the steps with the basic text provides a strong foundation for all members and facilitates future study with other NA literature. The basic text is uncomplicated, heartfelt NA recovery literature which addicts can identify with and embrace. This piece would logically be translated after the NA Intro Guide and before the book-length basic text, reducing the development time for emerging fellowships to be able to study the NA program. World Board response. As we expressed in the previous motion, we are enthusiastic about tools that will encourage members to work the steps. But considering each idea independently of the others doesn't give a sense of prioritization and doesn't allow the ideas to be part of an overall planning and budgeting process. This idea, as well as another idea for a step working guide for new members and those in treatment or incarcerated, are both part of the survey in this card. For an explanation of our approach to prioritization, please see our remarks in the survey introduction on page 24 and the introduction to the book-length recovery literature motions on page 38. If the WSC prioritized a simple step working guide aimed toward newcomers, we would frame a project plan, but we would use the same approach to create the guide that we do whenever we create a piece of literature. We would ask the fellowship what they would like to see in such a guide, and we would use their input to guide the work. We would put together a draft that reflects what we heard from members, and then we would again ask the fellowship for input on that draft. We cannot commit to a project that predetermines the outcome of the work before seeking input from all interested members. The rationale of this particular motion is, therefore, not something we could accomplish. It's contrary to the literature process to mandate the content, creation process, and format of a text before a project even begins. We could begin with the idea described in this motion, but the process of creating NA literature is inclusive and dynamic. It's not entirely possible to predict the result of our worldwide collective efforts.
There are 4 regional motions related to IPs and service tools. The introduction to the survey in this CAR on page 24 explains the approach we are taking this cycle to IP and service tool projects. We will offer a general project plan for service tools and one for IPs. Project plans are included in the Conference Approval Tract, or CAT, material. The conference will determine the specific focus of these 2 project plans by prioritizing a list of service tools and a list of IPs, with the results of the CAR survey helping to guide their decisions. Each of the ideas specified in the 4 motions that follow, motions 8 through 11, is included in the lists of IPs and service tools in the CAR survey. Using the survey to guide decisions about what IPs and service materials will be worked on allows the fellowship and the conference to consider ideas in relation to each other and establish priorities. Again, the CAR survey seems to be the best mechanism to guide the World Service Conference prioritization of projects because the survey includes all of the ideas for recovery literature and service tools that have been offered by conference participants. We are supportive of whatever the fellowship chooses as a priority. Motion 8 reads, to direct the World Board to create a project plan for the World Service Conference, WSC 2022, the development of a new IP for daily personal inventory of gratitude. The intent, to create a new resource for the fellowship members through a new IP for the daily personal inventory of gratitude. Maker, Argentina region. Rationale by the region. A new IP brochure is a tool for the members of the fellowship that inspires us to make a daily personal gratitude inventory that promotes actions inspired by the spiritual awakening of the 12th step of NA that encourages us to express our gratitude during the just for today and/or on a daily basis. Members, at any stage of our personal recovery process that we find ourselves, can be inspired by questions about this spiritual principle, with direct actions of gratitude and/or a gratitude list among others. and try to express growth and recovery through gratitude. The World Board response. We are supportive of whatever the Fellowship chooses as a priority. For an explanation of our approach to prioritization, see our remarks in the introduction to the IPs and service tool motions on page 40. The next regional motion in the Service Materials and IPs category is Motion 9, which reads, to direct the World Board to create a project plan for WSC 2022 to create a new IP for women in recovery. Intent, to create a new resource for women in recovery. Maker, Iran region. Rationale by region. Women in many parts of the world, including Iran, face challenges when seeking recovery in NA. In many NA communities, there is not a lot of access to other recovering women. There is a tremendous amount of experience in NA with these challenges that could be shared in an IP. These include cultural barriers for women, sponsorship, attending meetings when you have small children, lack of personal resources, etc. This IP could provide new women with other women's experience in resolving these challenges. The World Board response. We are supportive of whatever the Fellowship chooses as a priority. For an explanation of our approach to prioritization, see our remarks in the introduction to the IPs and service tools motions on page 40. The third regional motion in the Service Tools and IPs category is Motion 10, which reads, to direct the World Board to create a project plan for consideration at World Service Conference 2022 to create a guide for online meetings. Intent, to create a new resource. Maker, Latin American Zonal Forum. Rationale by the zone. Up to this date, those meetings are considered tools of our fellowship. To create a guide for the online meetings for them and to be able to meet the requirements to be an integral part of our service structure in harmony with our 5th and 8th service concepts, as well as our 7th tradition, among others, to ensure they work the NA way. The World Board response. This is a topic we have attempted to forward since it was discussed at World Service Conference 2018. We have held an open webinar to collect ideas and experience, and we plan to hold another after the WSC. We are attempting to gather the Fellowship's best practice with online recovery meetings. There is certainly interest and enthusiasm about this topic, and we plan to continue gathering recommendations for further discussion at WSC 2020. Because this topic was identified for discussion at the last WSC, and this is part of an ongoing focus, if this is prioritized at WSC 2020, it would mean work would begin in this cycle rather than the next. For an explanation of our approach to prioritization, see our remarks in the introduction to the IPs and service tools motions on page 40. The final regional motion in this category is Motion 11, which reads, to direct the World Board to create a project plan for WSC 2022 for a service pamphlet, SP, that explains being under no surveillance at any time. Intent, to create an SP regarding we are under no surveillance at any time will help to clarify the confusion that members may experience when they see surveillance cameras in facilities where any meetings are held. Maker, Carolina region. Rationale by region. Many facilities have sophisticated security systems, sometimes even inside a room where an NA group meets. Their purpose is to catch a burglar or a serious problem such as an active shooter, where a video record would assist the police later in an investigation. However, with technological advances and with the ever-increasing amount of cameras and high-tech security systems, it is leading to a huge confusion within the groups and areas. What do we tell our members, especially newcomers, who may encounter cameras in the rooms as we read aloud our statement about being under no surveillance at any time? Now, some of our members do not want to attend the facilities with cameras, or some are trying to cover the cameras. This is damaging the relationships with the facilities, as well as causing disunity in the areas and groups. The groups and areas are suffering as well as the members. Clarification is desperately needed. We believe that a new SP clarifying the difference between being monitored by a security system for everyone's safety and the state of being under surveillance may help in a situation where the facility has cameras set up on a permanent basis. World Board response. This is certainly an old issue that has caused confusion among many members. NA only speaks for itself, so any surveillance we refer to can only be about NA. We have no control over outside entities. Service pamphlets do not require conference action in order to be developed. But given our finite resources, we're asking the conference to choose the items we focus on in the upcoming cycle. For an explanation of our approach to prioritization, see our remarks in the introduction to IPs and Service Tools motions on page 40.
There are 3 regional motions in the Literature Development and Translation section. Some background information and resources related to this topic include Translation Basics, a resource for local translation committees which is posted on na.org. World Services Board of Trustees Bulletin number 19, Gender-Specific Language and Use of the Word God in NA Literature. That bulletin is also posted on na.org. And Addendum F on page 135 of this CAR, which is a list of materials we publish, including translations. The first motion in this category is Motion 12, which reads, to direct the World Board to create the Spanish language Narcotics Anonymous basic text, step working guides, and It Works How and Why available in an audio format. Intent to increase access to NA literature for the Spanish-speaking community. Maker, Southern California region. Rationale by region. Many Spanish-speaking persons leave school in the 3rd or 4th grade, and illiteracy is a large problem. NA literature is written in Castilian Spanish that is much easier to comprehend when spoken due to the variations in Spanish across the globe. This motion is also requested on behalf of our blind Spanish language members. Creating audio access is not an item the LAZF is addressing because they are doing the written translations. There is a dire need for auditory access to NA literature in the Spanish-speaking community of Southern California, and it would also greatly benefit Spanish-speaking addicts elsewhere in the United States and the world. Spanish is the second most spoken native language in the world. Our members have experienced that access to printed material is limited in rural and underdeveloped areas of Mexico and other Spanish-language countries, whereas internet cafes and cell phones are much more readily available. This motion is also presented to prevent rogue audio translations, which is likely to occur as this is a pressing need. This proposal is also likely to attract younger members. World Board response. We are in the process of working with local translation committees and zones to create the audio version of the basic text to post on na.org free of charge. We have previously reported that, given the pricing policies and mandates of commercial portals for audiobooks, we see no effective way to distribute this material through a paid portal that makes sense for our members. We appreciate the spirit of this motion, but we are recommending an approach that is not focused exclusively on one language. As we reported at WSC 2018, we are actively in the process of updating audio files for basic texts in the languages it is published. We plan to post these on na.org for no charge. We ask for your patience as we get this first step accomplished. This effort includes working with the approval panel for Spanish language translations that is part of the Latin American Zonal Forum to produce an audio version of the 6th edition basic text. We would like to continue with that effort and get the audio basic texts posted first. Accessibility to our literature is a primary concern for us, and audio versions of the basic text, currently 32, seem like the logical place to start. Let's see how this process works with the basic text first, and then we can evaluate the effort and decide the next step for English, Spanish, or any other language. Motion 13 is the next regional motion in the Literature Development and Translations category, to direct the World Board to create a project plan for consideration at the WSC 2022 to investigate changes and/or additional wording to NA literature from gender-specific language to gender-neutral and inclusive language. Intent. This motion will give the conference and the fellowship the ability to meaningfully discuss changes to our literature to be more inclusive of all our members. Maker, Sweden and Australia regions. Rationale by regions. Our literature currently makes multiple references to gender-specific and exclusive language. We recognize the importance of being able to identify oneself with the language described in our texts in order to embrace the program. In our fellowship, there are many who identify as LGBT+, who have experienced being made invisible in a great variety of situations. As a worldwide fellowship, we acknowledge that many cultures embrace non-binary individuals. Many of our members have expressed reservation at the male pronoun references to God, which may invoke an image of a specific God or religion. We believe this conflicts with our philosophy, which encourages all members to develop a personal relationship with a God of our own understanding. In NA, we are addicts first and foremost, and we must always keep our doors open for all addicts who have a desire to recover. We want our literature to be inclusive to all, regardless of how we might identify. The personal stories section of our basic text contains stories from transgender individuals, and we wish to build on this gender-neutral foundation to reflect in all NA text. We allow for personal stories to be exempt from gender-neutral language and remain as they are currently written. When collaborating with Sweden and Australia, it became clear that Sweden wished to have gender-neutral language that was complementary to the existing language, whereas Australia felt that replacement was the way to proceed. The motion has been written as such that all options can be explored in the project plan and recommendations provided back to the WSC and Fellowship. World Board response. The project called for in this motion does not direct any change. It seeks to open a discussion. As the intent explains, this motion will give the conference and the fellowship the ability to meaningfully discuss changes to our literature to be more inclusive of all our members. We anticipate the discussion would be focused on English language literature because our literature is developed in English and the English texts act as the prototype for any translation efforts. Translations may raise issues beyond the scope of this discussion. Different languages handle gender differently, and local translation committees are familiar with what they need to do to be consistent with the English texts. We have had related discussions in the past, but not since the early 1990s, and those discussions were dominated by a consideration of whether to use the word God in NA literature, while the discussion this motion seeks to open is specifically about gender neutrality. The Trustee Bulletin on Gender-Specific Language was written in 1992 when there were fewer than 20,000 NA meetings worldwide, and the basic text was published in 4 languages. Now, there are more than 70,000 meetings, and we publish the basic text in 32 languages. Our membership has grown and diversified over the years. So again, this motion is not a decision to make any changes. It's about whether we are willing to have the discussion. We support the idea of having a discussion and believe it is our collective responsibility to look at how our message is perceived. Motion 14 is the last regional motion in this category, to place an 8-year moratorium on the creation of new English language recovery literature after WSC 2020 to WSC 2028, excluding any literature projects already in development. Intent: to allow time and potentially free up resources for foreign language literature translation and production. Maker: California Inland Region. Rationale by region. A moratorium would allow international NA communities time to complete translations of our basic text and other life-saving literature, and hopefully allow the funds typically used for English language literature development to be redirected towards supporting international translation efforts. Imagine struggling to read our life-saving message in a language you may not read well, or at all. We are a global fellowship, and it is time to redouble our efforts to make our message available globally. World Board response. We share the desire to make our literature more accessible to addicts around the world. We look forward to a day when every addict in the world has a chance to experience our message in his or her own language and culture. We publish in more than 55 languages today. The literature list, included in Addendum F of this CAR, is testimony to the hard work of so many members and World Service's dedication to translations. This motion, however, would not free up resources for translations or production. These efforts, English language literature production, and translations and production of, quote, foreign language materials, are unrelated. The motion would not achieve what it intends to accomplish. NA Translations work is coordinated among a local translation committee, LTC, made up of committed members who are native speakers, NA World Services staff, and contracted professionals. In most cases, we use the professional translator as a proofreader and copy editor to go over the LTC's work. In some cases, a professional will also do some of the initial translations if the LTC is not able to. But it is critical that local members are involved to ensure that the language rings true to NA experience. LTC service is time-consuming and requires both skill and dedication. It takes a great deal of resources to produce translated literature, but the scarcest resource is actually human, particularly local LTC members.
There is one regional motion that addresses PR materials. Motion 15. Instruct the World Board to develop a project plan for the 2022 World Service Conference, WSC, to produce an informative video about Narcotics Anonymous for public relations services or committees and online publication, approved by NAWS, where it is briefly explained what is Narcotics Anonymous, how it works, and how to contact NA. The intent: that the Fellowship has a new public relations resource that explains clearly and briefly what Narcotics Anonymous is, how it works, and the ways to contact NA. Maker, the Argentina region. Rationale by the region. Public relations are very important for our fellowship. A brief explanatory video about Narcotics Anonymous would allow the service bodies of all NA areas and regions of the world to have one more tool in their PR efforts. This resource could be used in PR services or committees and online publications, such as the web, social media, etc. At the same time, audiovisual media, including digital media, are fundamental to communications today. Right now, there are multiple informative videos about NA, but none of them were produced and approved by NAWS. The production of this video will be an effective tool for all NA regional service committees. The video could be originally produced in English with a simple language and include the script in written form, separate the audio tracks, and make it available for download on the na.org website. This will allow the non-English speaking NA regions can easily translate locally, making the service material available to the NA regions that require it easily. The World Board response. We know there is a need for adaptable current PR resources, and it seems wise for World Services to produce such a video. Such a resource would help professionals and members of the public know who we are and what we have to offer. Our vision is that one day, Narcotics Anonymous has universal recognition and respect as a valuable program of recovery, and this kind of tool could be instrumental in that effort. We have been releasing board-approved materials for a 90-day delegate review before finalizing drafts, and we imagine this resource would be subject to the same process, as has been the case with other PR materials. Delegates would have an opportunity to give input on the content before the video is approved. The final category of regional motions is WSC policy, and there is one motion in that category. Motion 16. If any motion or proposal in content or intent has been submitted and failed to achieve consensus or adoption at 2 consecutive World Service Conferences, the previously proposed content and intent may not be suggested to the Fellowship in the Conference Agenda Report, the CAR, or the Conference Approval Tract, the CAT, or at the WSC for one entire conference cycle. The intent: to use the fellowship's decision-making processes and time responsibly and effectively. Maker, Volunteer, and Southern California regions. Rationale by the regions. By temporarily setting aside ideas and motions that have not been developed fully, this motion gives the WSC the opportunity to focus its limited time and resources on issues that have garnered a wide attention and direction for the body to decide. It also allows the makers of these motions time to develop the idea and build greater understanding and consensus within the fellowship. This motion would allow us to improve in how we carry out our services and try to learn from challenges and processes that do not yield a consistent or beneficial result. World Board response. This motion seems to be about respecting the spirit of consensus-based decision-making. If the same idea has been discussed repeatedly and is not supported, allow the conference to take some time before picking the idea up again. We agree with the spirit of this idea and the ideas expressed in the motion's rationale, but we have concerns that the motion as it is written might be difficult to implement and have unintended consequences. We are not sure how WSC would account for motions with minor differences, for example, or motions that are very different but have the same intent. For instance, the intent of this motion is to use the fellowship's decision-making processes and time responsibly and effectively. We can imagine many very different motions that might express the same intent. Also, the motion doesn't leave room for new information that might arise, which would motivate the WSC to want to consider the same issue again. Improving the effectiveness of the WSC has been a focus of ours for many cycles now, and we appreciate that participants are thinking about how to maximize our week together and use the WSC's time responsibly. But we don't believe that this is a practical way to accomplish that. We hope that this video has helped in your discussion of this material. Please note that there are 4 other videos that focus on CAR contents. These videos, the Conference Agenda Report, and the CAR Survey are available online at www.na.org/conference. Hard copies of the CAR may be purchased from NA World Services.